Hey friends, hey, it's Heidi Sonboul. Thanks for stopping by my channel to watch this fun video collaboration I'm doing with Yami from the Latina Next Door. If you are a subscriber at my channel, make sure you swing over to her channel to check her out. She did an amazing project where she took an item that was normally $1.99 and got it down to $10. I will post her direct link to her channel up in the right hand corner so you can get there real easy. If you watched my invitation video to this challenge, you will know that I found a chair for $17 that looked exactly like a chair at Pottery Barn. And the one that was at Pottery Barn was way expensive. So I took it and I reupholstered it. And this is the process that I took in reupholstering this chair. Now, reupholstering a chair is not a super easy task to do, and you actually need a few tools for it, and so I will just go ahead and link those down below in the description box so that you guys can get directly to them if you are interested in trying out reupholstering a chair and you've never done it before. I found it enjoyable, but I will say, you guys, that it is a commitment for sure. So make sure you take pictures of your chair before you start so you remember where everything is and have the proper tools on hand, which are pliers and nail removers. Also, make sure you pick out your fabric and get enough so that you don't have to go back to the store. I ended up getting 4 yards and I ended up having to go back to the store a second time to go get more fabric, which was so frustrating. I ended up having to get 2 more yards of fabric. So just plan on, for this size chair, that you would end up needing about 6 yards of fabric. Taking apart the chair can be very time consuming, and if you don't know what you're doing and you're feeling kind of frustrated, just remember to put on some good music, and that way when you get down to the last piece of fabric, just like I did here, and you took it off, you can celebrate with joy. This particular chair had a lot of hand stitching in it and a ton of nails, and every single time I went to pull out a piece of fabric or undo some nails, it would just shoot nails all over my office, and it was like pretty dangerous actually. I had to keep having to stop to pick them all up so no one stepped on them. And this is what the chair looked like when all of the fabric was gone and taken off of it and stripped down. Now, some other items you're going to need are some foam and some batting to make sure that you can replace any old batting that might be on the chair. So I started with the armrests. It's very important to make sure you kind of replicate the pattern. As you took off the fabric, you put it back on in that same order. So these pads that were on the armrest were the last thing that I took off, so those are the first thing that are going to go back on. As you can see here, I'm cutting the foam down to size, and there's no real pattern for these types of chairs. You really just have to kind of wing it, but make sure you take your time and don't try to rush through it, because when you do, you'll make a mistake. And so I like to just take my time and make sure I get it right, and then I am going to first, I staple it on the bottom side of the armrest, and then I bring it around to the front and staple it down in the crevice of the chairs. And then to make sure there's really good padding, I took a little bit more of the batting and I shoved that into that little area there so that I made sure that it was nice and padded, so when you sat in the chair it was comfy. And then I added a little bit more batting to the very end of the armrest to make sure that that doesn't wear down over time. Now that I have my armrest done, I can go to the next item that I took off in that order, which was the seat of the chair. And so I take a piece of fabric, I lay it on top, I take it in a square type form, and I just tuck it down in the sides. I cut slits where I know that there's going to be wood in the way, and I just kind of, again, take my time. I kind of crease it down around, I pull it around through the back, and then when you feel comfortable with the way it looks and it's nice and tight, you can take your staple gun and add staples to the fabric to hold it in place. I did this exact same thing for the fabric on the arms. I just laid a piece of fabric over it, I cut it down to size, and then I stapled it in the shape that it needed to cover the foam padding. And I also used a almost like a pleating pattern to make sure that I got around that curve. Now this is how I measure for the fabric to make sure I don't cut too much. Whenever I'm getting ready to do a certain section, I will take a tape measure. I will measure 4 inches past the side to make sure that I have enough fabric to work with and pull through. So this particular one, you know, I make sure I added on 4 inches on each side of the square so that way it was nice and roomy enough for me to be able to work with. And then before I put down the backing of the chair, I added a little bit more padding and make sure that it's nice and comfy for whoever sits in it. I started to pull the fabric through, and to make sure it stayed in place, I put one staple at the very top of the fabric on the back of the chair, as I wanted to make sure that it didn't fall and stayed in place so I can get the right tension on the fabric. And then as you can see here, this part is probably one of the trickiest parts, is because you have to cut little slits in the fabric, because the way chairs are designed, there's a lot of different nails that you have to kind of shove your fabric through where the wood is in the back. And what I use is a stick to help me be able to get through those areas, and I just kind of measure it and I just keep eyeing it. If you sew at all, this is a project that you will be able to definitely master. If you're new at sewing, I definitely recommend picking up sewing first and then trying this. But you know what, if you have a chair sitting around your house, I say go for it. Just make sure you really take your time, like I said before. So here I am after I had cut all those different slits that I needed, and I'm sliding them through those different areas to make sure that it's nice and tight and it's upholstered properly. So you can see that I'm taking the fabric on one side and I'm using a stick or a dowel, whichever one you have on hand, and I'm just shoving it through the spot that I need it to slide out of so that I can bring it around the back to staple it. And sometimes when your fingers start to hurt, I like to use a pair of pliers because it really brings it through nicely without hurting your hands even more. Then once I had all of my different pieces through, it was time to start stapling all of those fabrics in place. So after I staple them, you don't want to have a lot of bulk of fabric, because that causes an issue when you start to lay on your final top pieces on your chair. So I like to just cut them down after I have them all stapled into place, and I remove that excess fabric that's not necessary. If you see any staples that didn't seem to staple properly, I like to take a hammer and I like to hammer them in to make sure they're all there. And then moving on to the arms or the wings of the chair, as you can see, I'm measuring it and I add a little bit extra. I add that 4 inches to make sure that I have enough fabric to play with so that I don't cut anything too short, too small. A little bit later in this video, I will show how I do the piping on a chair. This whole project was a no-sew project, which was probably the most amazing part about it, is that I didn't have to stop and pull out a sewing machine. But these metal brackets are so key to upholstering a chair. Again, I will link that product down below on Amazon. I got a good deal for it there, and you can find it through the link that I will have in the description box below. But basically, you're going to take these metal brackets and you're going to lay them on the spot where you want to have a seamless finish. And be very careful not to bend the teeth, because you need those teeth on the metal bracket to hook into the fabric. And then when you bend it forward, it catches onto the fabric and it pulls down into place, and it gives it the most beautiful finish without having any weird staples or, you know, stitching by hand. If by accident you happen to bend the teeth down while you're hammering it into place and moving it around, I like to take a fork and a pair of pliers to help me poke them back out. And so here I am, I'm just speeding up the process where I'm hooking in all the fabric, I'm pulling the bracket forward, I'm pushing it down into place, and then you take a mallet and you just simply go along and you just hammer it down into place. Again, take your time when you're doing this to make sure you do it right, because you don't want them to be banged into place wrong. All right, so When I get all of those pieces aligned on the wing, I'm coming back up to the top to finish my final tension pull at the top of the wing. And so I'm just bringing over the fabric and stapling it into place. And after I am all done doing that, I'm going to staple the rest of the back pieces as well from the wing to make sure everything is properly stapled down. On the front part of the wing of the chair, I like to do a pleat up there, and you'll see that I am going to do that pleat in just a second. And here I am again with my mallet. I like to, again, nail down those staples really well to make sure they're not moving. So for the pleat, I go in from the top and then from the bottom, and then I pull it in the middle, and then I start to slowly pleat how I want it to look, and then I hammer it back into place to make sure everything's good. And then here I am again, just cutting off all the excess that you don't need. That's just going to cause problems later when you're trying to lay down your top fabric. And if you see any spots that you might have missed, make sure you go over those on the top to make sure everything's stapled nice and neat, because you don't want any of the staples to come loose. And then here I am bringing around my piping to finish the look on this other side of the wing. Now, on the wings and the back of the chair, I added back in padding because this is some of the stuff that I pulled out from the old upholstering on this chair. And then you just take some burlap. I actually cut my finger there with the pair of scissors. That's why I stopped the way that I did. And so once you get your padding in there, you are going to take burlap and you're going to lay it on top, and then you're going to staple it all into place. And this gives it the most beautiful finish that if somebody ever were to take the chair back apart again to want to reupholster it, they'll see that there is this nice layer of burlap in there. Moving on now to the fabric on the back of the chair. I will link the product for this as well down below in the description box, but these cardboard strips are life-changing. I've never used them before because, again, I've never upholstered anything, but they were really neat because you staple them right up to where you want your seam line to be, and it just strengthens where your fabric is being stapled into place. So once I had that top part stapled and I pulled it down over the back of the chair, I just stapled the rest of the fabric into place. If you see any old nails that are popping up like I just did, make sure you hammer them down so that they don't pop out through your fabric and rip your fabric, because that would just be such a tragedy. You do all this work and then have it rip that way. So here I am again, just trimming. And then this is the side of the wing where you can see the piping. So I'm going to show you how I do the piping. You take the rope, and you take a piece of fabric, a strip of fabric, and you treat it almost like a taco. And then for the nice finish, you fold it over just like this, lay it down, and staple it into place. Now, to give it that Pottery Barn look that I was seeking, I am taking my piping and I'm just going all along the entire sides of the wingback chair. And then down here are the brackets, because this is going to give it that really nice upholstered finish look. And up at the top, I use those cardboard strips again. I'm pulling the fabric over, and now I'm going to take those sides of the wingback chair's fabric and I'm going to tuck them into the brackets and then bend them forward and hammer them into place. It's actually kind of satisfying hammering all these brackets into place. I actually enjoyed this part quite a bit. I think I could do this a lot more than just on this one project. If by chance you have one of the brackets that didn't catch properly, I just took a little bit of hot glue, I went into the little crevice, and then I pulled the piping forward and glued it into place, and no one will ever know that it ever happened and it looked a little bit off. But make sure when you do the hot glue to take your time. All right, now I'm starting to work on the batting and the padding on the sides of the chair underneath the armrest. I'm just going to take some and push all of that into place, and then I'm going to nail down the burlap. And then once I get all that done, I take my next piece of fabric that I'm going to lay over that part that needs to be finished. I'm taking that cardboard strip again. I'm going to nail it all into place so it's nice and snug. And then I'm gonna pull it over towards the back where I have brackets laid out. And then here I am showing how neat it is to hammer these brackets into place. They are just so stinking cool. Look at how nice the finish is on that. Like, there's just no way you could do that without these brackets. And then this piece I saved from earlier. When I pulled it off, I was just being very careful with it. This goes on the very front of the armrest, and I have 3 nails that are shoved into it so I can nail it onto the front of the armrest. And I took some of my fabric and wrapped it with it. Now here I am putting in the piping, and I'm slowly taking my time going around the turns. And to make sure it stays nice and snug in place, I put down some hot glue. I'm a big fan of hot glue, you guys, like a really big fan. And then you're just gonna take your mallet, and if it looks like it's getting a little iffy with the nails, I like to take a piece of fabric and I lay a piece of fabric on top of it to make sure that it doesn't cause any stress or tension on the fabric with the nails. And the last step is to just put on the bottom piece of your chair, which you're going to take a long strip of fabric. I had about 6 inches, 7 inches, and then I pulled it over and we stapled it all into place. I cut slits along where the legs were to make sure that was nice and tight, and I rolled it under to give it a good look. Here it is, you guys. I love my chair, and I saved hundreds of dollars doing this myself. I almost did cream, but because I have kids, I just didn't want to take the chance, and so I went with blue because I know that's a color that we all really love here in our home. But you can see the finished look, and you guys, for this being my very first time upholstering a chair, I gotta tell you, I am pretty proud of myself because this was a thing that I've had on my to-do list forever to learn how to do. And I will be honest, my hands were so sore after doing this project. I even had to enlist my husband towards the end to use the staple gun. I get now why people have the high pressured staple guns, because it really helps with that issue. Thanks so much for watching this video and stopping by my channel and participating in this challenge with Yami and I. If you are new to my channel, don't forget to click that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions, leave them down below. If you're looking to reupholster a chair, I'll be happy to answer and share the things that I have learned with you. And now that my video is done, make sure you head over to the playlist and to Yami's channel to check out those other videos. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye guys.